Hello, this is Interview of the Day on Silkway TV channel. I'm Ainura Mangala, and today I'm joined by United States Ambassador to Kazakhstan, Mr. Daniel Rosenblum. Hello, Mr. Rosenblum.
Hello, very pleased to be here today.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. So let us start our conversation from talking about the current state and the perspectives of Kazakh-American relationships. What is done by the U.S. Embassy and by the U.S. itself in promoting business and partner ties and relationships with our country?
So first of all, I'd say overall the state of our relationship is excellent. It's very strong, maybe as strong as it's ever been in the 31 years that we've had a relationship with independent Kazakhstan. And I think the reason it's so strong is it's like any good relationship. It's based on trust and on mutual interests. The trust is something you just build up over time by being a stable and reliable partner. And I think the U.S. has always tried to be predictable and reliable as a partner to Kazakhstan and vice versa.
Yes.
The mutual interest comes about because we share certain goals. We share common goals. And one of those goals is to promote more U.S. investment and U.S. business, as you mentioned, in Kazakhstan. And in terms of what's happening on that front, again, very positive news. I think 2022, we saw a big increase in bilateral trade. I think it exceeded $3 billion in two-way trade. We also saw a significant increase in direct investment from the U.S., from U.S. companies. And we see it only growing. Just last month, we had a business mission of U.S. companies. I think it was about 17 or 18 significant U.S. companies came here to explore opportunities, to meet with private sector partners and with the government. And we also are seeing, and I think this is a very positive development, more interest in diverse areas of the economy. Very early on in our relationship, some of the very significant amounts of capital coming in were from some of our big oil companies, and that remains true to today. But we're seeing now interest in aviation, in healthcare, tourism.
What about renewable energy?
Renewable energy as well. In renewable energy, I think the U.S. Involvement will come more likely in the technology side and the knowledge side, not necessarily the big infrastructure projects. But there too, yes, we're seeing more interest. So I think I have nothing but positive thoughts about the future of our economic relationship. And then I'll just mention two other areas of the partnership which are, I think, significant and notable. One is that we have supported very strongly in the past year and a half or so the ambitious reform program that President Tokayev laid out back in early 2022. And we remain supportive of the goals of that program. We recognize there's a lot of implementation still to come, and have offered support in a variety of areas to help with the implementation. So that's one thing that is important in the partnership. Another, I think, is what I would call the foundation, the bedrock of the relationship, which is the people-to-people ties between our two countries. Everything from students, teachers, business people, all kinds of exchanges and joint ventures and partnerships. I think someone the other day estimated, I don't know the exact number, but there have been maybe over 900 different joint ventures between U.S. and Kazakh companies over the course of our relationship. Huge number of exchange participants who've come to the U.S. from Kazakhstan. I think the other day I saw a number of over 20,000 over the past 30 years have gone on exchange programs. And I have had a chance to see for myself in recent months some of the educational partnerships that are forming. In Petropavlovsk, we have the University of Arizona with a joint degree program with the Northern Kazakhstan University there. And we know that Penn State University has been exploring potential partnerships, and several others too.
So there are projects to come.
Projects to come, new things to come. Anyway, all of these examples to me points to the strength of the partnership and the potential for it to grow.
Right. At the beginning of this year, there was a first visit of the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, to Central Asia and Kazakhstan. And Blinken underlined the importance of relationships with Central Asia right now. So what is on agenda right now? And does it mean that the USA, that USA will integrate more in the regional agenda and in the process of regional integration?
So I'm glad you mentioned the Secretary's visit, because for us that was a real milestone in the relationship and a very significant event. It was his first visit to the region, but hopefully not the last. And we've had a number of other senior visits over the past year. Significantly, as you pointed out, he came with an agenda about the bilateral relationship, but also the regional piece, and participated in the C5+1 meeting here in Astana. The C5+1 has been around, our C5+1 has been around since 2015. I had the honor of being part of the very first C5+1 with Secretary John Kerry back in 2015. And I think it's fair to say that it's reached a point of being very practical and operational, you might say. There are 3 working groups under the C5+1. One focuses on economic issues, connectivity and trade, one on environmental and energy issues, and a third on security issues, cooperation on counterterrorism, law enforcement, et cetera. And all 3 areas are very active. We have working groups in each one. The working groups meet. The thing that gets the most attention is, of course, the big ministerial meetings, like the one in February with Secretary Blinken. That's what people focus on. But what they don't know as much, and I follow this, so I know something about it, is this work that happens in between the ministerials, where we're cooperating on joint projects that are moving forward the idea of regional integration. And so I think that's very important. And then the last thing I'd say about this is that, there are a lot of C5+1s, not just the U.S. We weren't the first. I think the Japanese had the first one about 20 years ago. They started, South Korea has one, started soon after, the European Union. Once we started ours in 2015, it became, I hate to say this, a little sort of fashionable, trendy, and everyone wanted to have one. The other day, an official, a Kazakh government official told me that I think there are 10 bilateral C5+1s and maybe 2 other multilateral ones. To be honest, I pity my colleagues at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who have to, manage all of this. It's good, though. I think it's a good thing. It's a working mechanism to have these formats of meetings. Yeah, there's a reason why it's popular. But the most important point to take away from this, and what I take away, is it's great that there's all these C5+1s, but the really important thing that's happening and that I see potential for is C5 without plus or minus, just C5. That is, the 5 countries themselves working together, signing agreements, finding new cooperative ways to integrate the region. And that's happening as well. So I think all of us, I can only speak for the United States, all the friends of Central Asia are hoping that that's what happens ultimately. In the end, we don't need the +1 or the -1. We need C5 to work together. So what is the vision in general for this, for Central Asia, for this region? Well, the vision is that the region itself, the countries, the 5 countries, have to define the vision themselves. But certainly the United States is hoping and rooting for this region to trade more effectively within itself, to integrate its energy systems, to cooperate to meet common threats and common challenges. And again, I see it happening more and more as time goes on, and I hope to see that continue. Yes. Let us talk about geopolitics a little bit. So how does geopolitical factor will and could influence the future of Kazakh-American relationships, and what do
Kazakhstan and USA do, and how do they work on the sanctions issue on this regard as well?
Yeah, it's we recognize that Kazakhstan is in a challenging position. Kazakhstan didn't choose its geography; it inherited it from the past history, but we know it presents some challenges with respect to geopolitics and so on. We have worked very hard with our partners in Kazakhstan to mitigate the impact of those sanctions on Kazakhstan, and to understand Kazakhstan's position, to respect the fact that it has important trade ties with Russia that can't just stop. It has a lot of economic relations that are understandable and that exist. We very much appreciate, very deeply appreciate the position that Kazakhstan has taken.
Yes, it has been stated already, so what next?
It's been stated publicly, it's been stated frequently that
Yes.
Kazakhstan will not itself violate the sanctions or become a platform for the circumvention, for the avoidance of sanctions. So, in order to help Kazakhstan in that position, we have worked very closely as partners. We have had multiple meetings, regular communication between our officials, even sort of seminars to explain the sanctions, what they prohibit, but also what they allow. Because it's very important to understand that, you know, much of the economic activity that Kazakhstan engages in is not subject to the sanctions. So that kind of exchange of information has been critical and has been regular over the recent months, actually over the past year since the war started.
Are you satisfied with the work so far? Can we say that?
Yes, I can say I'm very satisfied. Kazakhstan takes its commitments seriously. It made these commitments. It's taken them seriously. A great example recently, by the way, fairly recently, a couple months ago, we had two senior officials from our Treasury Department and our Commerce Department come specifically to engage with our partners in Kazakhstan on very, technical and specific issues of sanctions observance and sanctions enforcement. So that, I think that will continue. I'm very optimistic that good partnership will continue. I should also add that I know another priority for Kazakhstan with respect to the geopolitics and the sanctions problem for them is diversifying its trade and finding different trade routes, so it's not reliant on just one. And there too, we have sought to be helpful. It's really primarily Kazakhstan that needs to do that, as they recognize itself, but and with some regional partners, working with regional partners. But the U.S. can be helpful and wants to be helpful in diversifying.
But media reported recently that 2 Kazakh companies have been included in sanctions list of Ukrainian government. So unfortunately, there is something is going on there. So what does it signal for the U.S. and what kind of circumstances could it revive?
Yeah. So, we have our own list of sanctioned companies and our own rules on this, which again, we've been very clear with Kazakhstan what those are and have worked closely with them. Ukraine, as a sovereign country, has its own processes for that, which are separate from ours. But we are aware of this, and we'll just continue the conversation with officials in Kazakhstan about how we deal with specific issues of sanctions evasion. And it's been a good partnership.
Thank you. And finally, let us talk about the issue that may be interesting for many people, for many Kazakh citizens. This is regarding the visa issue. So what is the current status of the facilitation in the visa issue for Kazakh citizens? And what are the perspectives of possibility of easing visa regimes for Kazakh citizens in the future?
First of all, I want to say that our goal is to make travel to the United States as free and as open to citizens of Kazakhstan as possible. At the same time, we have to recognize that there are requirements and restrictions and rules that have to be observed, and we take those seriously too. So I will say that we built up a big backlog on visas during the COVID pandemic. Because travel was restricted, and we weren't processing requests for visas for a long time. Fortunately, I think we've now reached a point where the backlog has been eliminated, and so that's good news for people applying for visas now. Also, if you look over the period of our relationship, we have, I was looking up the figure the other day, and I think 250,000 or more than 250,000 non-immigrant visas have been issued to citizens of Kazakhstan over that period. So that's fantastic because we want to facilitate that, those, as I said earlier, the people-to-people ties, and this is one of the best ways to do that. Kazakhstan within Central Asia actually has a very favored position, you might say. It's the only country in the region that is, whose citizens are issued 10-year visas for back and forth travel. So that's a great potential for people to engage in more of that people-to-people kinds of activity. And we'll continue to find ways to work within the rules that we have and the restrictions to make it easier to travel. But I'll be honest, it can be a challenge at times. Part of the reason it's a challenge is that there's always a number, maybe it's a small number, but there nonetheless exists, of people who don't observe the rules, who don't return when they should. They exceed the duration of their visa, or they engage in activity that's not provided for under their visa. So we look at all these factors, and we do the best we can to facilitate travel.
But the work on easing, like this, the getting American visa will be continued.
Yes, absolutely. It's part of our bilateral dialogue with the government as well, because your government is looking out for its citizens' ability to travel.
That will be very great news for people who want to travel.
So we'll keep the dialogue going. And again, I mean, going back to what we said at the very beginning, in my answer to I think your first question, I really view this people-to-people interaction as the foundation of the relationship. So we want to do whatever we can to continue it.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenblum, for your time and for your answers. That's it for today. Stay tuned and follow us on our social media. Have a nice day and see you later.